Welcome to Concrete Conversations, the Indian Real Estate podcast. I'm Yash.
And I'm Akshay, and we're the hosts of the show.
From WeWork to Regis, the recent years have seen co-working emerge as a viable option all over the world for freelancers and large firms alike. With remote working becoming a core business necessity over the past 2 years, an increasing number of employers are adopting various forms of hybrid working models, offering greater flexibility to both employees and employers. So, how has hybrid work changed the commercial real estate market? What are managed offices? And what does the future look like for co-working spaces?
To talk about this and more, we have Aditya Verma, the founder and CEO, and Nikhil Madan, the co-founder of the Office Pass. Both Aditya and Nikhil are no strangers to innovations in the real estate sector. Aditya was the co-founder and CEO of Madan.com, one of the first property portals in the country, where he met Nikhil. In 2017, they founded the Office Pass, a co-working brand based out of Delhi NCR, working on a walk-to-work model. So get ready to learn about the future of co-working in Indian real estate.
So, hi Aditya, hi Nikhil. Welcome to Concrete Conversations. How are you guys today? How's your morning going?
Yeah, hi Yash, good morning. I'm doing great today.
Hey, thanks, Yash. Good morning. All well. I hope all well at your end too.
Perfect. Yeah, all good on our end, thankfully. So I thought it would be interesting to our listeners to know a bit about your journey in the real estate industry. I know you guys were involved with Makan.com, and the journey from there to starting the Office Pass. What has that been like for you guys?
So for me, I think that my journey in real estate actually started much before Makan.com happened.
Right.
So after graduating and doing my MBA, most of my friends who had settled abroad, and most of my relative who had settled abroad, they invariably ended up buying properties in Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida area. And since they did not have anybody to kind of manage those properties here, I used to be their contact person in India. And pretty much I managed at one point in time around 16 properties for my friends and relatives.
Wow.
in this area, wherein I used to take care of the maintenance of those properties and making sure that the tenants are satisfied. Also at times collecting payment.
Right.
And I was doing it just as a hobby. That time I didn't even realize that it was an interest in real estate that was making me do that. But I think somewhere down the line I realized that this is something which I enjoy doing. So was looking at opportunities in that space, and that led to me co-founding and subsequently becoming the CEO of Makan.com.
Right.
And the whole idea was that we will have a classified website wherein people who are traditionally going and advertising their properties on the newspaper would find it more convenient to do it on the web. And that is how Makan.com started.
Right.
Pretty much ran that business for 7.5 years before we sold that to a company called Prop Tiger. This happened in 2015. And after that transaction, I was looking at doing something in the real estate space, and started also studying deeper into a new phenomenon which was emerging in the US and Europe called co-working. And that is how the Office Pass was started around 4.5 years back.
Right.
And Nikhil, what about you?
Yeah, so my journey, with Makan.com, basically, it was a pretty exciting one. I tell you what. So my stunt first, started, with the online real estate portals. Basically, when I actually was looking for a property for myself. So at that point of time, I, came across 99 Acres and Magic Bricks. And after a couple of years, I got an opportunity to join Makan.com. So it was so almost a decade we spent at Makan.com and handled different verticals. It was again a startup.
Right.
And then when Aditya actually discussed Office Pass, so it was it sounded pretty exciting, yeah. And that's how we joined hands together, and that's how the journey started.
Right. And I think the obvious question is then, you obviously Makan.com, as we just spoke about, it was largely dominated or almost completely dominated by residential real estate. And then the Office Pass is obviously now very clear-cut commercial real estate. So in terms of your time working in the residential sector, did you feel that there are any lessons that you learned from your experience with a startup like Makan.com that made it easy to transition to another startup at the Office Pass?
Yeah, most definitely. In fact, I think one aspect of the full value chain when it comes to property transaction, which is the contribution made by a intermediary, which is broker or agents as they are typically known, is grossly undermined by both the parties which are getting into the transaction. In fact, there is a belief that agents do not add much value. However, the reality is that if an agent is involved, you are 50% more likely to conclude that deal than trying to do it yourself.
Right.
Right.
So the trick is to involve an agent, to spend time and effort to identify a good agent and then let him do the work for you. It will work out to be much easier and much faster and much more economical for both the sides.
Right.
I think this is at least my biggest learning from the Makan.com business.
Right.
You guys mentioned that when you started the Office Pass, it was the co-working was a new and emerging concept in the US and in Europe, and it definitely was an emerging market segment at the time. But there's so much that's happened since then, and so much change that we've had in real estate, and especially in the last 2 years. So I wanted to get your opinion on what you think the current state of the co-working market is in India and how it's changed over these few years.
So when we actually started, whenever we used to make a phone call, I still remember that Nikhil, me, and Sachin, the third partner, we used to do most of the calling ourselves. So
Right.
the moment we used to utter the word co-working, there used to be an immediate question that what is co-working.
Right.
So we used to spend good amount of time in just making people aware that what this co-working animal is. And also one thing which happened in the initial few days was that while we were making 20-25 calls every day, the we were getting very less traction from people because people were really apprehensive as they are with most of the things which are new in the market. But the first 1.5 years, I think there was very good traction to this concept from fraternity, which we call freelancers, and also startups.
Right.
So the advent of co-working and advent of startups in India almost coincided. Uh,
Right.
PM Modi launched the startup initiative in 2016, and that was about the time that co-working also came into the Indian market. And what we have seen over a period of time that it is no longer limited to freelancers, startups, but even mid to large size companies are opening up to the idea of co-working. Larger companies tend to prefer managed offices more than co-working, but mid companies, small companies, they are all have realized that there is commercial and operational benefits by opting for co-working offices. So that is a major change that has happened from the time that we started and over the last 2.5 years period.
Right. Right.
And also, so after I think over 1 year or so we were also entered the Indian market, right? So they also started a lot of advertisements, a lot of branding they actually created. So I would say, so they also help in making awareness around the market. So what co-working basically is all about.
Right.
So a lot of people were reaching out to WeWork now to understand the dynamics, how it actually works. And it was a very sweet spot for us because they are now aware that what is co-working all about, what are the benefits that they're getting. So they found it pretty exciting.
Right.
Right.
So that also actually say helped us.
Right. With that in mind, and since we're talking about the changes over the last few years, how has the client base, changed when it comes to co-working? Like Aditya mentioned, originally the largest sort of catchment was freelancers and small startups. Today, do you see sort of the same dominance in your consumer base, or do you think the consumer base has shifted, especially given what we've seen in the last 2 years?
So what we are seeing here, so the freelancers and the small teams, they have actually gone away. However, as I said, so large corporates, bigger companies, that's what are considering office pass or flexible options, and that's how our client base is actually has also increased.
Right.
Right.
And Nikhil, you mentioned work from home, and since that's become such a big part of our lives, I thought that I would ask you, with the trend of work from home, work from anywhere, and even companies looking at hybrid working models of some employees being in the office, some employees working from home. How do you think co-working plays into this trend of new and hybrid working models or partial work from home that we're seeing? And is flexibility now really important to these client customers?
Very much, very much. So when these bigger organizations, they are talking about giving the flexibility, to their employees to work from anywhere, to work from home, or come to office only thrice a week or twice a week, and all those hybrid models that they're working on.
Right.
They find co-working spaces are the best possible solutions.
Right.
One, because people do not want to commute, for the longer hours now anymore. They don't want to use the public transport. So, something which is closer to home and not binding the organizations into long-term contracts, they are able to give the flexibility. Let's say today they want to give 10 seats, take up 10 seats, or tomorrow 15 seats, or come down to 5 seats. In a traditional office, this is not possible.
Right.
But with co-working spaces, this is definitely is there, right? So,
Right.
I think that makes sense. And I think that since we're talking about the changes in the co-working space, we're talking about the learning curve when it not just from the business side of things, but also from the consumer mindset. One of the biggest questions is, how do you ensure that the service across all the Office Pass locations offers both a standard product, but then also caters to the local catchment? In terms of some markets, some areas may have a larger population of, say, IT engineers. Other areas may have a greater population of freelancers in the creative space. They have different requirement when it comes to what they need in the office. And feel free to share maybe some case studies through the learnings that you all had over the years with this.
So, one thing that we have seen in the Indian context is that whenever a concept which has become popular in the developed world, when you try to bring that concept into the Indian situation, unless you customize it for the local audience, that concept stays languished for a significantly large portion of time.
Right.
And we have examples. We have multiple examples in the consumer space and in the corporate space, wherein people have learned the hard way that Indian consumer is far more demanding than their counterparts in the developed world, and thereby customization is the key.
Right.
So when we looked at these large formats in out of US, where the infrastructure has kind of kept pace with the growing population, we felt that in India it is the reverse. So our infrastructure typically lags our population growth in any particular city by a decade.
Right.
So expecting the same format of large format offices and expecting people to commute long distance in the Indian scenario, especially in cities like Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, right, is almost thinkable, because we are used to spending almost 2 to 3 hours every day in just commuting to work. Initially we found it hard to sell this concept, but I think when pandemic happened and there was aversion towards public transport and people were afraid that they might get infected if they are traveling in metros or buses, that is where this demand got amplified. Demand of offices which are close to the place of residence, and we got a major leverage out of that increasing demand, because as a concept we always felt that we are solving for commute. So we were opening offices not only in the CBD areas of the city, but we were also opening offices which were close to residential neighborhoods.
Right.
So the demand for residential neighborhood offices immediately increased, and there was a acceptance of this particular concept which we termed as neighborhood co-working, both from the employers and from the employees, because employees, they wanted to walk to work, and it is convenient to expect somebody to commute, say, 1 kilometers on foot, right, and reach office, rather than commuting for 1 hour in public transport.
Right.
So although we had conceptualized this format much ahead of the pandemic, but I think the pandemic led to a faster acceptance of this particular concept and acceptance of the term neighborhood co-working.
Right.
I think what you had said about solving for commute, I think that'll hit home to a lot of our listeners, because that's very relatable in large metro cities in India. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask you, this concept of walk to work that the Office Pass is trying to implement, in vast cities like Delhi, for example, that the distances are so huge. How do you go about implementing a concept like this where it's still close enough for people from the catchment area? And like you said, you all look at offices in central business districts and also close to residential. So how does that process work from your end?
So when we pick up any city, take Delhi NCR as an example. When we look at the city of Delhi NCR, we do not look at co-working, three or four co-working offices solving the big issue that people are facing. So when we look at the city, we look at 40 offices. So we informally call ourselves 7-Eleven of co-working, because like there is a 7-Eleven store in every block in any city in the US or in Europe. We would want office pass to be available to consumer every 5 kilometers to wherever they are in a particular city.
Right.
So, and that is the reason why we have offices format which starts from a low of 3,000 square feet, and we have office formats going up to 30,000 square feet.
Oh.
So depending upon the area that we are opening our offices, if it is a CBD area, we typically take larger formats, which will be 15 to 30,000 square feet.
Right.
But if it is next to a residential neighborhood, the product offering will be more like 3 to 8,000 square feet.
Right.
So I think more realization of this, the advantages of this concept being offered at a price point which is easy on the pocket for most Indian consumer, is what will make Office Pass a very differentiated product when it comes to the co-working market in India.
Right. And taking sort of a step back, because I think one of the things you said is very accurate, that the Indian consumer is a highly price sensitive consumer. But looking at it from the office passes perspective and the business perspective, I wanted to ask both Aditya, you and Nikhil, what sort of is is there a difference in the design planning, in the space planning when it comes to the residential neighborhoods versus in the commercial business districts?
So all our offices have kind of standardized desk space. So if you visit one office to another office, you will find the same color desk, same size of desk, the wall art, etc. would always give you a feeling that you have come to the same office as you are used to expect from an office pass.
Right.
You will find that 80% of the things will be common, and about 20% of the stuff will be customized because of the size limitation. Just to give you an example, a cafe in a 30,000 square feet office would be pretty luxurious and would be able to accommodate far more people than a cafe in a office which is 1/10 the size.
Right.
And similarly, the common facilities proportionately their size would be adjusted based upon whether it is close to a residential neighborhood or it is a big office in a CBD area.
Right.
Correct. I'm just sort of following up to that, since you talked about the cafe. I was very curious to ask you, and feel free to say if you can't answer this, because this is perhaps a business decision. But when you talk about the amenities like the cafe, maybe if you have an extra large space somewhere, you might even want to have like a gymnasium in the facility. So I mean, any kind of amenities that you incorporate into the office pass locations, are they all managed by the office pass internally, or do you tie up with partners to sort of manage specific functions to cater unique products and add sort of that USP to the office pass?
So I think scaling up can happen only if you are able to identify partners along the way, and this does not hold true only for the co-working business, but I think it pretty much cuts across various vertical and various businesses.
Right.
So we have painstakingly used multiple vendors in the first 2 years of our operations, but pretty much now our say internet service provider, people who run our cafes, people who manage the housekeeping in our office, people who manage the CCTV coverage, surveillance, attendance recording system, etc. But over a period of time, we have identified one or two vendors who are helping us implement this wherever we are expanding.
Right.
We know that we are spending good 12 to 15% more money in in identifying vendors of that type, but it gives us and our members a lot of peace of mind while we are scaling up and while those services are being rendered across our offices.
Right.
Yeah, also, so because our SOPs are in place, right? So, so it actually helps in providing the standardization also across all the offices that we have. So that actually makes life very easy for everyone, and these checklists, these SOPs have also helped us in streamlining and bringing the standardization across and maintaining the quality overall.
Right.
Right.
I think all this, talk of amenities, value adds, and services kind of blends into the next question I wanted to ask. One of our guests had talked about the concept of real estate as a service. And when we were recently talking about, changing client bases and hybrid working models, the term managed office spaces that you said kind of stood out to me. So I wanted to ask you, how is managed office spaces a new concept? Is it a part of co-working? Just for the clarity of our listeners, is there any difference between the two? And what about this specific market segment of managed offices? What do you see as the growth there?
See, if you look at the commercial real estate spectrum, and on the left hand side, you would start say from cafes which are being converted
Right.
into workspace for people. That is as informal as it gets. And on the right hand side of the spectrum, you can say that traditional leased offices are there.
Right.
So co-working would be somewhere in the middle, wherein you are offering commercial services, but there are multiple organizations which are using those commercial spaces.
Right.
A managed office is more towards the right hand side, wherein in a managed office, you are basically developing an office for a audience of one. Typically, the thumb rule to use to distinguish between a co-working and managed office will be that in a co-working environment, the office comes first and the clients come subsequently. In a managed office, the client gets identified before the office is identified for that client.
Right.
So typically, you would find that mid-sized companies which are say having manpower of up to 500 people would typically lean more towards the co-working environment, but multinational companies and large Indian corporates, wherein they need to present a certain personality and a certain character and a certain brand to their stakeholders, they typically lean more towards the managed office.
Right.
Right. And since we're talking about sort of the definitions of these various concepts, could you maybe give us just a simple breakdown of what if I was a consumer and I came to an office pass location, how would it work? What are the options available to me? What are the models that I could run with?
So when we actually design our offering, so it's very simple that we give you the flexibility that even if you need the office, for just twice a week, or for just 10 days in a month or 15 days in a month, so we give you the flexibility to choose such plans also as per your own convenience, as per your own requirement. Also at the same time, then we have plans with a monthly, wherein you want dedicated seats, and so keeping in mind as per your requirement, you can actually opt various plans and offerings that we have.
Right.
Right. And just as a follow up to that, on the flip side of things, I wanted to ask now from a company perspective. Suppose a firm that's looking for managed offices, what are the advantages contractually for them? Is it flexibility in terms of, again, like lock-ins and like contract length?
So for managed offices, typically the main advantage is that you see when you are running a office operations of your own, there are around 12 to 14 vendors that basically helps you in smooth running of the office.
Right.
So in a managed office environment, companies who do not have the bandwidth to manage those vendors and look at compliances, we basically take that heavy lifting on their part, and we present them a single invoice, and the entire coordination and implementation of smooth running of the offices through those 12 vendors or through those compliances is taken care by us. Also, the office is customized as per the brand guidelines of that organization.
Right. So if I were to just connect it back to the real estate as a service thing, this is like providing a white label kind of office solution for a company, right?
Yes, so the offering actually extends in a managed office far beyond just providing an office. In a managed office environment, the company gets identified before the office gets identified.
Right.
So, right from knowing the requirements,
Right.
shortlisting of multiple offices, arranging for site visits, negotiating for those offices on behalf of the client, then getting the fit outs done as per their specification. So entire handholding process. So it's a far deeper engagement in a managed office situation, wherein is a co-working, the tenure and the level of engagement is relatively lesser.
Right. And we spoke about earlier on about how the consumer education has changed over the years, and how the consumer mindset towards co-working has changed even more so in the last 2 years, especially when you talk about the walk to work concept. How have your tenants' expectations from the Office Pass offerings changed, not only over the years, but specifically in over the last 2 years?
You see, there are two things which drive consumption in any market. One is that you are providing a service which is more convenient than a service which was already existing, and second is that there is a economic benefit of shifting from one service to another.
Right.
So what has happened on account of pandemic is that the co-working has been able to offer both. Not only is it convenient for you to move into a co-working office, so you might decide today that you want an office space and you could be in office with your team as early as tomorrow.
Right.
Right. So that is a convenience which you never had in the past. And because of the pandemic, there has been a correction in the real estate rentals to the extent of 18 to 25%, depending upon which market you are talking about. So operators like us are able to rent a office space at 20-25% cheaper as compared to the pre-COVID period. And since we are keeping our margin consistent, we are able to pass on that economic benefit.
Right.
So typically a seat which used to cost around 9,000 rupees pre-pandemic, if people are able to get that seat for 7,500, there is an economic benefit that we are able to pass on to the consumer, which we were not able to do earlier because of the high real estate prices.
Also, what we have seen, the companies, because now they are also getting into the hybrid model, they are asking employees to use office pass on frequent basis. So and they do not have HRBPs, so basically to take care of these employees at each location, because now they are with co-working spaces. So now the company's expectations are that the overall what do you call, the engagement levels, the morale can also be taken care by the co-working players.
Right.
Right. So I thought we would take a step back. We spoke about standardization and the concept of walk to work. So how do you go about scaling something like the Office Pass and a model like walk to work? Because right now, especially when you're moving to different markets and cities.
So typically, whenever we decide to move from one location to another, like within Delhi NCR as well, if we are thinking of opening up a new office, we typically do some 3 or 4 fake campaigns on Facebook.
Right.
So we basically assume that there is an office and we start promoting that offices on Facebook.
Right.
So and we run this campaign typically for between 15 to 20 days at different location at different price point, and it has really helped us in terms of gauging the demand in a limited geographical area and the price point at which there is maximum demand. So I think
Right.
we will carry the same phenomenon forward. Like we are looking at opening our office in Mumbai now, and we have already done this activity up in the month of October, wherein we identified 5 locations in Mumbai where we could potentially open an office, and we did fake campaign on Facebook for all the 5 locations. And what we ended up realizing as part of that case study was that there is maximum demand in the Andheri East area as per that activity, and the price point at which there were huge demand was between 8,000 to 8,500 rupees.
Right.
So now we know that if we have to enter Mumbai, Andheri East might be a good area for us if we can achieve a price point of 8 and a half.
Right.
Do you think that there's also potential for tier 2 and tier 3 cities?
You see, if you look at the way commercial real estate has spanned out in the Indian market. The top 7 cities in India account for almost 85% of all commercial real estate activities.
Right.
Yeah.
It is only in the last 18 to 24 months, because of the pandemic, that people were forced to move to their hometowns. uh, I still believe that there is lack of jobs in the smaller cities in India, and we would pretty much wait and see whether this shift to smaller towns, is it a permanent shift, or over the next 12 to 18 months period, most of these people who have gone back to their hometowns are forced to come back to the city because there is less jobs in the smaller cities in India.
Right.
Right.
If it is more of a permanent nature, then it is but obvious for people like us to look at tier 2 and tier 3 cities more actively for co-working as a product. Currently, my gut feel tells me that it will be a temporary phenomenon, but I will be happy if I am proven wrong. Because more cities that there are available to us to explore, it basically increases the co-working pie.
I think this conversation has really come together full circle really well, because I'm going to bring it back to one of the things you mentioned when we spoke last, is that one of perhaps the more subtle missions of the Office Pass is to change the perception of real estate as a male-dominated industry. So could you maybe tell us a little bit about what the Office Pass is doing to build this gender equality in real estate?
You see, this is not only a problem limited to real estate, this is a generic problem in the Indian workspace. And but when it comes to workplace population, female contribution towards the workplace population is less than 18%.
Right.
The problem is far more amplified when it comes to real estate, because when we were running Makan.com, out of the 182 people that we had, 12 were female.
Oh, wow.
I think the problem still continues forward. One of the baby steps that we had taken in Office Pass was that we started offering 10% discount on all the seats across our offices for any female member who wants to take up a co-working space. Just before the pandemic, we had thought that because startups were gaining momentum in the Indian ecosystem, we had thought that any startup which takes up co-working at Office Pass, which are led by female founders, they would get 3 months of free service at any of our offices.
Wow.
All these steps were aimed towards encouraging more female participation in the office, and also female participation in the real estate domain.
Right.
Yeah, so there was just one more thought, so just crossed my mind. So if you remember, Aditya, during our initial days, so when we were actually looking at the offices, while choosing the location, it was the paramount thing for us, keeping in mind how the female employees are gonna be, reaching this particular space. What are the surroundings around? So that is the granular level we were actually going into while identifying an office. We even thought before this pandemic, 2 years back, so we were even contemplating that how we can, make life more easier for working moms. That can we, make an area dedicated for a crèche.
Yeah.
Right.
So they can bring their kids. So this is a kind of comfort, apart from the other discounts and all which we were giving to our members, so just to have more and more female participation in the workplaces.
Right.
And my request to everybody who is listening, who is running a real estate business, would be to find ways of how they can encourage more female participation in the real estate business, so that the business itself evolves and starts becoming more gender neutral than it is as of now.
Right.
Right.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think it's an initiative we can all draw some inspiration from. As we now come towards the end of our conversation, we've touched upon a lot of the here and now questions, a lot about historically what has changed in the co-working space. Wanted to ask you, both Nikhil and Aditya, your opinions. What does the future hold when it comes to co-working, and specifically when it comes to the Office Pass?
So you will find that the acceptance of co-working in the Indian scenario will be far faster than what it has been pre-pandemic.
Right.
I mentioned a few trigger points that currently a co-working seat is at least 20% more cheaper than compared to pre-pandemic. on the supply side, people are becoming more open to giving their office spaces to operators like the Office Pass. Previously, it used to take us almost 4 to 5 months to close an office space, which we could convert into co-working.
Right.
Post-pandemic, this timeline has come down to 2 months. And I think as the acceptance of co-working as a phenomenon increases, more and more property owners and property developers would find this as a more viable option.
Right.
So I think the acceptance on the demand side has been far faster. Over the next 3 to 4 years period, there will be a higher acceptance among the property developers and the property owners, and a combination of these factors would ensure that currently, if co-working accounts for 12 to 15% of all offices supplies, this should increase to around 25% over the next 3 years period. That is my firm belief.
Right.
Yeah, so just to follow up on this, I wanted to ask you, maybe it's something that we've kind of missed in the earlier parts of the conversation, but I wanted to know, when the Office Pass works with landlords to convert a space into a co-working space, what sort of different models do you guys use when you work with a landlord or a property owner?
So currently the most popular model is straight rentals. So we negotiate hard on the rentals,
Right.
but we give a visibility which is slightly long term for the property owner, so that he is able to take advantage of this relationship over a longish period of time. But what we assure the person who is renting his property to us is that his property will continue to be used without a break for a significantly large portion of time.
Right.
Various companies have tried a revenue share formula in the Indian market,
Right.
but I find that there is a lot of lack of trust, which kind of source the relationship, which is of a revenue share nature.
Right.
My personal belief is that a rental agreement which runs successfully for 3 to 4 years has a very decent chance of turning into a revenue share arrangement at a later date, because that gives you that 2 to 3 years time to develop trust between the two sides. Any model which has a trust deficit typically tends to fall flat.
Right.
I think most of the relationship would start from a rental model, and subsequent there is a possibility of converting that into a revenue share model.
Right. I sort of building on this, because I think that a very interesting next question, maybe at a future date, would be: do you think the Office Pass would ever consider even a franchisee model? Because trust is a huge factor even there as well.
Yeah, so I think franchisee models are typically successful in businesses wherein there is a long-term visibility of good profitability. I think we are moving in that direction. So this year would be the first year wherein the Office Pass business would be not only cash positive, but will be EBITDA positive, and will generate profit after tax.
Lovely.
The main motivation for a franchisee is that he is leveraging your brand and he wants to make money out of it.
Right.
So first of all, you need to be making money to instill that confidence in the franchisee that yes, he can use your brand to make money. So I think franchisee opportunity is a very, very big opportunity. And when you marry that with our expansion into tier 2 cities, I think that is a model which we would love to evaluate. But as I mentioned, we see that opportunity coming our way in 18 to 24 months time from now.
That seems like an exciting opportunity. And I think with that, just wanted to say a huge thank you to you, Nikhil, and to you, Aditya, for joining us today and for explaining all these concepts to us and introducing our audience to co-working.
Totally agree with Yash. Thank you so much, Aditya. Thank you, Nikhil.
Thank you so very much to both of you, and for inviting us, and of course, wish you all the very best, and congratulations for this platform that you guys are that you have created.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Concrete Conversations on Instagram to know more about upcoming episodes and for some behind the scenes content.
For more deep dives into the world of Indian real estate, stay tuned for more Concrete Conversations.